Your honor is to the audience, to our fans, really. Basically means, we're going to rip our hearts out for you tonight. Which is what we try and do live, or what we do. We just can't help. That's just what we do,
I really want this one to be the record that in 20 years, when some kid asks their dad, like, you ever heard of the Foo Fighters? Like, oh, yeah. Which record should I get? They should say in your honor.
G'day. Welcome to the Underrated, Overrated Dumpster Fire podcast. I'm Sam Edmonds.
I'm Paul.
And this is a new show that we're doing for you guys now on video on YouTube. Of course, it's going to be the same great podcast you've come to know and love, but we're also going to be doing a new video component. So thanks so much for joining us.
Vogue.
Madonna.
Who's not what we're talking about today.
No, it's not. So we're doing the same thing that we do every week. We're taking a classic album and we're having a chat about it, and we're deciding based on reviews then and now whether we think it's underrated, overrated, or if it's a dumpster fire. But this year, it's going to be a dual host system. We're going to have guests in, we're going to have a chat to them, but my friend Paul here is going to be here full time.
That's me. I'm going to be here full time, co-hosting to keep Sam on track.
Gotta keep me on track.
Happen. It's not going to happen at all. Sam's going to try his best to keep the podcast on track, and I'm going to do my very best to derail him at every opportunity.
So we've done a bunch of albums, and you guys can go onto Spotify and Apple Podcasts and a bunch of other ones, and you can check those out. Paul and I, the first podcast we did together was Songs for the Deaf. We re-listened to that this week to figure out what we were doing right and what we were doing wrong. So you can also maybe chime in on that in the comments. But check it out.
Tell us whether our podcast on whether Songs for the Deaf was overrated, underrated, or a dumpster fire. Tell us if the podcast was overrated, underrated, or a dumpster fire.
We rate it very highly. But
Yep.
You guys let us know. We've got a comment section now. We're going to be checking up on that. We've got links in the banner as well that links to our Facebook, our Instagram, but also the podcast on Spotify and on Podbean. But we want to hear from you guys about, what you think of the podcast and what we're talking about. But also we want to hear from you guys, what album should we do each week. But this time we've decided amongst ourselves, because this band just brought out a new album, we've decided to talk about the Foo Fighters album from 2004, In Your Honor.
Yes. 2004?
2005. Recorded 2004, released 2005. We were very young at the time.
We were very young at the time. I would have been, let's say very young. I was 16. It was some years ago.
That's many years ago for
But
us.
I feel like that was, teenagers buy a lot of music. And this was in the days where you bought music.
Yeah.
You didn't just have your mum pay $10 a month to Spotify or
On a family plan.
or preferably Tidal
Yeah.
on a family plan. Not that we had any of those. You went out and you bought your CDs. And 16 was probably like your peak. I'm really into music. I'm really buying lots of CDs right now. Time in terms of you were influenced by things you might not have had a set thing that was yours. You could have easily been influenced. And I guess that's when In Your Honor came out for us.
So Paul went and bought this album. He took his money, and he's actually brought his copy here today that he bought when he was 16.
So if you're listening to the podcast on something, tough luck. You can't see it, but it's here.
With a cracked gel case and all from years of use.
It's I've turned the cover inside out, so it's the back cover on the front, because I thought that was cool because I was 16. And you've got the bison on the front on disc 1, and then disc 2, it's the arse of the bison. It's the arse of the bison on disc 2.
So
Creativity.
So why are there two albums on this one, Paul? So Foo Fighters are a rock band, fairly well-known rock band. Dave Grohl, obviously the drummer from Nirvana, but went and decided that he wanted to do some of his own tracks, and so recorded an album where he played all the instruments himself, self-titled Foo Fighters album, released in 95, 96, maybe 95, 96.
It was like the year after Nirvana finished.
Yeah. So he'd been recording these demos after Kurt died, spoiler alert, and had decided that he would release this album, and it got some record companies got hold of it because it was the 90s, and record companies, if you could chew gum and play guitar at the same time, you'd probably get signed. And he obviously had the pedigree of being in like the most successful band of like the last 10 years.
Yep.
And so they decided to sign him to a record deal, and he made a couple of albums, Color and the Shape. He made There Is Nothing Left to Lose,
Yes.
as well as he went and played with some other bands like Queens of the Stone Age, which we again covered on the Songs for the Deaf album review.
I thought Smash Mouth was going to be the recurring feature in all of my appearances, and maybe for future podcasts, it's going to be my job to mention Smash Mouth at least once. But apparently, it's not. It's Dave Grohl.
It's Dave Grohl.
Dave Grohl comes up all the time.
He's ubiquitous within music ever since he kind of started with Nirvana.
Ubiquitous within music and within our podcast. Strap yourselves in for 2 hours of
2 hours of Grohl.
Yeah, 2 hours of Grohl.
Paul Talks Grohl is the new name of the podcast.
Yeah.
So
Old Grohl all the time.
So after he got out of Queens of the Stone Age, he did an album called One by One, and then he followed that up with this double album. And this album's a little bit unique, isn't it, Paul?
This one that's falling apart.
Yes, that is the most classic, like, teen gel case setup.
It's in
I've
3
seen
bits
in a long
now.
time.
It's
That's
in 3 bits
amazing.
now. It's I recently threw out all my CDs, and just as we decided to do this, and I picked this up and was like, "Oh my goodness, I've got the real thing."
That's fantastic.
I'll have a look and I'll bring it along. And it's got on the front, it's got new double CD, 20 songs on 2 CDs, one loud, one not so loud.
And so why is the second one not so loud?
So the question was, what's special? So this is, double album. The second one's not so loud because Dave thought it'd be a great idea to have an acoustic album. And I think he was pretty adamant when he was recording. He was like, I've written a bunch of these songs. They're all acoustic songs. That's the way they are. We're not going to workshop them with full band. I've written some acoustic songs, and we're going to have a whole album of acoustic songs.
Yeah.
Let's put it after an album of like proper rock songs, because otherwise nobody's going to listen to it. I'm assuming that's not quite how the conversation went, but I would like to think it was close.
Yeah, I guess it had a pretty well-established brand by then as being quite a hard rock band.
Yeah.
And so if you were to suddenly just turn into an acoustic, folk, group of quartet, that would have thrown quite a few people.
Yeah, adapted into being a bunch of Norah Jones collaborators, then people would have been quite confused.
Yeah.
Though I guess, they probably had some reason to believe that the acoustic side of the album would have been successful in its own right.
Yep.
Given, like, there was acoustic versions floating around to, like, Learn to Fly.
Everlong.
My Hero. Oh, yeah. Everlong, of course.
Times Like These.
Yeah. Lots of big acoustic versions. But obviously those songs, maybe they were written like that by Dave. Though I would imagine, like, there's all these stories of, Dave just recorded it in his garage. His garage would have been mint.
Yes.
Like, he's not just gotten, like, some dodgy, secondhand acoustic guitar. Actually, it might have been a secondhand acoustic guitar from, like, John Paul Jones or somebody incredibly famous. But he's sitting there with his full setup, amps and all, blasting at all hours of the night, recording his albums.
So you mentioned some collaborators. So this was the first time they'd kind of reached out and gotten people to come in and feature on the album. And they had Norah Jones. They got John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin fame, as well as Josh Homme from, obviously Dave knew him from Queens of the Stone Age.
Yeah.
And they came and played on the second album. Let's talk about that first, because we'll talk about the rock album in a minute, because I think it's probably the thing that it's got the hits on it. The thing that most people remember about In Your Honor is probably on that rock album. But let's talk about the acoustic album, because it is a real departure.
Yes.
Do you think it was a good idea to include a full track list of acoustic songs?
Yep.
Like
Look,
10.
This is 10, yeah.
10 or 11
it's an
or-
even split. It's two CDs,
Yeah.
10 songs each, split down the middle. Look, I'm going to say, and this is potentially contentious, I think it was a good decision.
Yep.
Because, and again, this might put it down, but I don't think it would have lasted on its own.
Yep.
And I think And like, again, this might have been, I was 16 when it came out. As I said, it was an influential time
Yeah.
to be buying music.
Yeah.
When you're 16, CDs are a thing. Like, double albums were like a cool, exciting thing.
Yep.
So it built up the hype. I don't think it would have lasted by itself, though.
No.
It doesn't stand up as an album in its own right, but as like, it sort of almost feels like a collection of B-sides.
Yep.
Which, like, there's some good songs on there.
Yep.
I have to say, I was very excited that it was a double album when I was 16.
Because it's extra bang for your buck, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're paying the same amount that you would for 12 rock tracks, and you get this whole bonus CD.
Yeah, it did feel like a bonus. Like, I remember, and I'm probably still listening back to it now over the last week or so, didn't feel like it was part of the album. It felt like a CD of bonus tracks.
Yeah. Which is very common at the time, where people would attach tracks to the end of their albums.
Yeah.
I remember having a really old Five album, Five spelled 5, IVE, and they had like secret hidden track right at the end. It was like track 55. You'd listen to 54 tracks of silence that all went for about 3 seconds.
Because your CD would just play.
Yeah.
And it would just go to the next song, and there would be no songs for like 40 songs.
And then it would then it played like an Inspector Gadget theme that I presume they'd written for the movie but had been rejected.
Yeah. Probably played it during the credits or something.
Yeah, and I was like, geez, that's really weird. Like, it was a great song. It was my favorite song on the album, but I think maybe because it was kind of hidden. But like lots of bands did that. I remember on Diorama, there's a hidden track there.
Yeah.
I didn't know about it for years until Kiri's like, wait till the hidden track comes on. I'm like, but this is taking forever. There's so much silence.
Can we skip forward? Is that a thing we can do? So like, I think it was a good decision to have the second album of acoustic tracks there, because to me it just made it feel more special. Like, you get more bang for your buck, but it felt more. I'd had a few of their albums by that time. I think I'd been given, or I got One by One. I think that was the first album I'd had, and I'd had listened to a few tracks beforehand.
Tell me about that, because I remember you telling me about your first time listening to All My Life at a Friend's Place.
Yes.
Which is off that One by One album.
Yeah, that was huge. And again, I think we were potentially talking about Queens of the Stone Age and things like that, and going down that road. Nirvana, there was sort of another grunge resurgence.
Yeah.
Or grunge vibe happening at the time. And I think my mate might have had One by One. No, he had it on his computer, downloaded like illegally on LimeWire.
From like LimeWire.
yeah, LimeWire. So we're just
the kids playing at home. LimeWire was like
Spotify, but illegal.
Yeah, so you would have these like, because Napster was like a little bit before years, and that was like, it was a website that that was set up where you could download the MP3s. But when that got shut down, it was because it was a dead set server. So what that happened was that they would have peer-to-peer sharing, and that you would use a client like Kazaa or LimeWire, or there was a few others, and you could never take it down even though it was breaking all these rules, because it was just the file was being shared by so many people at once. It essentially became what BitTorrent was, like when people were downloading like Game of Thrones because they didn't want to pay for Foxtel. Yeah, it's like the same concept.
Yeah,
as for you,
for you on the other side of the camera set / earphones. If you're under 24. But yeah, I remember, like we're just listening to all these cool songs, and then I really liked One by One. Yeah. And hearing that, opening track, All My Life, and just it was gritty. There was a lot of energy about it. And then I think I went out and bought the album, and then that might have been like as In Your Honor was being announced potentially. Like I didn't get into it too.
There's not a big break between the two albums. There's only a couple of years.
It's a year or two tops, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I got that. Yeah, there might have been 2 years in between. I got that, and then all this hype started for In Your Honor. Yeah. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be so good.
They were probably never bigger than they were at that point in time, were they? Like, the Foo Fighters was such a big deal. Yeah. I say that as their new album, Medicine at Midnight, goes #1 in Australia, which has happened for their last back to probably before In Your Honor.
I think that was probably the album though that launched them to that level.
Yeah.
Like getting songs all like Best of You out, which I don't think that's their best song, but
No.
everybody would know Best of You.
Yeah.
Like played on all the commercial radio stations. It was also probably the time, and the acoustic album is probably an interesting thing when you consider that was also probably at the end of the time where proper rock music was also the same as pop music.
Yeah.
Like all the radio stations would have played Best of You.
Yeah.
And potentially a couple of other tracks off the album. Like I feel like I remember hearing like DOA on like Fox or Nova or something
And
like that.
I reckon Resolve as well, which
Yeah.
might be my favorite song off that first side.
Yeah.
I reckon I used to hear that fairly
on the
fairly
daily.
a lot. Yeah, I don't think it like to the levels that you would hear like the Pretender off like the next album off Echo's Patience, but like it's still like a really big deal.
Yeah, really big deal. And I don't think like they were a big band before that in terms of like it was probably easy, given the interest around Dave and where he came from. But then, pumped out quite a few good songs, got quite popular. They had their own little scene. This was probably the one, particularly because One by One was probably a little bit more aggressive than some of the other albums. Like, it wasn't a Monkey Wrench or something.
No.
That was a little bit more aggressive. This was the one where this is
as well.
Yeah, In Your Honor was popular. Like it was
Yeah.
proper popular, huge hype.
Yeah.
And I think going back to the original point about the acoustic tracks, it was a good decision because it just made it a bigger deal. Like there was so much hype.
Yep.
And like all the over the top artwork, like previously, like all their film clips are quite quirky and funny
Yes.
and
they would kind of take the piss.
Yeah.
They'd do like different.
extracting the Michael quite significantly.
Yeah.
And they're all quite fun and there was cool album art, whatever, but it wasn't anything out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
And it felt like with this album they went really over the top and all that stuff, which I loved. I thought it was cool. Like I've turned the back of the CD case inside out because I was like, oh, that's cool as
You
well.
preferred it to that.
Yeah, to the eagle flag thing that's going on.
It's very Americana, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, it's very evocative in that
Yeah.
way. Geez, and it's torn here too. Like that's how how convinced he was that. Yeah,
It was a better decision.
Well, let's talk about the rock side.
Yeah.
I think, in my personal opinion, it might be the best they've sounded from a rock point of view. Like, huge sound. Like, the drums are gigantic. We were listening to it in the car on the way to record this, and the drums are huge. There's so many layered guitars. Dave's voice is just jumping out of the speakers. Sounds phenomenal. I think even though there might not be as many recognizable hits on this one that there might be on like The Color and the Shape, it's probably consistently from Go to Woe, and it doesn't stop. There's no breaks between tracks. It's just one after the other, and it keeps hitting.
I think Fugees have been quite good at their opening tracks.
Oh, so good.
In Your Honor was spot on. Like, write a better opening two songs. We'll wait. No. No, but like the really like cool build up and In Your Honor, like just bringing in the instruments one by one. Like it's it's nothing groundbreaking, but it was just done perfectly. Really nice slow build. There's some cool atmospheric drums and stuff, and then it cuts into the next song where it's just like the
Very
opening,
rhythmic.
the opening riff to No Way Back, which I think was potentially the most fun song on the album. After probably the most serious song on the album, on the rock side anyway. Or the most like, dark and moody.
Yeah, like, In Your
That
Honor,
was
I Will
fun.
Die Tonight. You
Yeah.
know, which in interviews they said, actually a longer part of the interview that we played at the start of the show
Podcast
today.
show?
Yeah.
What do we call it now?
Yeah, is it the podcast? The YouTube cast was he talked about it being his like love or like an ode to the fans that the addictive part of performing that they would like literally put everything on the line. And then we see that later on in his career when those famous pictures of him with a broken leg in the middle of, you know, he'd fallen off a stage and broken his leg, and he's in this like custom made like guitar like covered like throne of rock, like trying to sing and play the songs at the same time, like in immense pain
after he's broken his leg. A couple of minutes previous.
It's craziness.
No Way Back. In Your Honor, No Way Back. Really well put together rock album. I don't know, it's only 10 songs. They're not overly lengthy. But if you just put it on, it feels like it's over in 30 seconds. Like it just it's so listenable. Which a lot of this Foo stuff is like, and I think they do a really great job of being proper rock and roll, but
still accessible.
But understanding how to write a pop song. And understanding, you know, just good songwriting in general.
And it's a line that they've managed to walk that some of their contemporaries have really struggled with. You know, bands like Creed or Nickelback that end up being, you know, they came up around the same time and they end up being a bit of a butt of a joke.
Sort of post-grunge,
that kind of vibe of bands. And they managed to, and still to this day, walk this line where, you know, it's hard to find somebody that really, really dislikes the Foo Fighters. I don't know anyone. And maybe that's like I've culled my friends to a Foo Fighter safe zone. But I don't know. I leave us in the comments if you really dislike Dave and Friends. Let us know, because we haven't met anyone yet and we'd love to talk to you. And we're not going to tell you you're wrong. But like the video.
Like the video, and then you can come on the podcast and try and convince us that
the Fooies are awful.
The colour and the shape was overrated.
Anyway, so we've got two sides of the album. You know, it felt like a bonus. It felt like, you know, like found money, really. It's like, you know, you found a 20 on the floor, because you get a great rock album. And then you get, you know, there are some real moments on that second album that I really, really enjoy. But there's also a lot of chaff. There's a lot of stuff that really could have, like, Friend of a Friend is one example. It's a song that sounds very similar to Nirvana's Something in the Way off Nevermind. It has that kind of vibe, that sort of energy, and apparently it was written around that time. It was the first song that he'd written on
apparently
an acoustic guitar.
Dave used to like just muck around with the acoustic guitar and tour with Nirvana, but then would be too scared to like
show
be like,
song.
Your drummer's written a song.
Which, given like the songs and the stuff that Kurt was writing, it would have been extremely intimidating.
But hey, Freddie, I think I should sing lead vocals on this one.
But I think that that song and a couple of others on there, the song featuring Josh Homme, Razor, and there's a couple of others as well that I think probably could have gone. Like, they didn't need to be there. And I think...
I feel like I liked Razor. Maybe I'm getting confused. Because they're all a bit the same.
That's the thing, isn't it? Like, they're all a bit samey. And maybe that they had 10 great rock tracks and they felt like to really balance a double album, they needed 10 acoustic tracks. And maybe there's only 4 or 5 really great acoustic tracks that they had. I think nowadays, like in the days of Spotify and streaming, they may have just released that as like a little acoustic EP that you can chuck online. And I think maybe people would, you know, see it in a different light.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know. And again, like, so I've not looked at any of the reviews yet. I did search one thing up, but we'll get to that later on. I feel like people really hated on the acoustic side and were like, it wasn't as good. And the idea about, if you put a couple of tracks up now, I don't think people are going to listen to it then. And as much as there was probably a couple of tracks that I would cut from an album, I like what they've done. I like that they've put a double album together that's got a bit of symmetry, and there was a reason to it. It also, and we might circle back to this, but the acoustic side, them writing that and recording that, helped the rock side.
Yeah, tell us a bit about that.
So
they were recording at Studio 606, like a studio that was literally being built around at the time.
Foo Fighters Central, pretty much.
Yeah, so they came straight off tour. They go straight into the rehearsal room. They start demoing new songs. And then they record the rock album while the studio is being built. Dave convinces them to play some of these acoustic songs he's been written. And then what happened?
So I think David sort of laid that out from the start that, hey, we're going to do this acoustic album as well.
Yeah.
And then so they've done the rock album.
Yeah.
Like they've pretty much done it. And then they go, all right, let's do this acoustic one. Recorded the whole thing in 2.5 weeks, which is impressive.
Yeah, very.
And did it all raw. So like the
We
acoustic...
struggled to do a podcast in 2.5
Yeah.
weeks.
Yeah, that's it. You guys will still be listening to this one podcast in a week from now.
Yeah.
Sleep deprived. But like, I can't turn off. It's so good.
It's so great.
I'm going to share it with my friends and like and... Oh, no, I'm not doing it. I can't. I'll make Sam do it at the end.
We'll do it, yeah.
Where was I? I've lost myself now.
So 2.5 weeks acoustic.
2.5 weeks acoustic, and the rock stuff, like they had a good idea, they workshopped them.
Yeah.
They had like a process. They went and did every instrument separately, as you would.
Yeah.
The acoustic one apparently was a lot more freeform and a lot. Okay, so it goes like this. Cool. Let's just jam it out. Sweet. Yep, that's one track done. Next.
Which is kind of how acoustic tracks are sometimes written. It's a person by themselves a lot of the time.
Yeah.
It's a melody and chords maybe, and then there's a lot of room for embellishment.
Yeah, like it was probably, I'm imagining Dave goes, yep, goes like this. They're all sitting around. They've got their instruments there. And, you know, Taylor's like, how about we shuffle? Yeah, cool. Great.
Yeah, about that. I wish there was much less drums on that second album, but that's okay.
Look, it's a drummer's band, eh?
Yeah.
But what the story they've told from the acoustic side of things is they did that and were like, look, how direct the songs are because of the way they've recorded them
and how quickly
and how they came together and stuff, even though they were based on stuff that, you know, it's already been written.
Yep.
They listened to the rock album and went, oh, the acoustic stuff's doing a better job. I really want to hear what the rock side sounded like.
Yeah, originally.
This.
Yeah, because that would have been hard, I think. Because if the songs are the same songs and the structure's the same, it would be tough to... Like, what sort of major changes would you make?
What have you missed, or like, what have you overproduced on that first album that's made the acoustic stuff outshine? But apparently they went back, redid the rock stuff, and then we're like, yeah, this is perfect now.
Well, I'm really glad they did, because
it's great.
Those they sound fantastic. One criticism of some of the other albums is that the rock stuff, especially on One by One, it's very heavily compressed, and there's you know, midst of the loudness wars, they're trying to get as much volume out of the CD as possible. We might do one of their albums in the future, but I had an experience where I first became really aware of it.
Yeah.
If you put a Living End CD into a disc, into like a CD player in your car or whatever, it is so loud. And I remember ripping it to my my little MP3 player that you could put like 256 megabytes worth of things on, and I thought I'd ripped it at a lower bitrate because it sounded so much worse than everything else. It sounded so like crushed and compressed.
Because they're pushing the volume.
They're trying to you squeeze out a lot of the life out of these tracks. And so One by One really suffered from that. But I really, even though it is still really loud on In Your Honor, there's some breathing movement, and it just it sits better. They they figured it out a little bit more, and
it's like they've got a bit more headroom or something.
Yeah. And the drums in particular, I think, is the thing that benefits from it the most. They really do sound gigantic in a way that only Taylor and Dave do drums.
Yeah. It was like Def Leppard Loud and Control, but with a bit more chaos.
Yes.
Because it's Taylor drumming.
This is Taylor.
And Taylor and Dave are very good drummers. That have got their own thing going for them. But I 100% agree. I think it was the most polished they had been up until that point.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's something that they've taken forward with them. And I think, was it the next album that had The Pretender on it? Mm-hmm. And I think that won a Grammy, and that was huge.
Yeah.
And again, that was played on literally everything several times a day.
And I think they took the ideas that they'd had from the acoustic album and combined it and gone, you know what, we can actually put this into one track listing, and we don't have to make people listen to 10 acoustic songs straight. You know, we can have, Road to Ruin and Ballad of the Beaconsfield Miners, and we can chuck it in between these kind of harder rock songs like The Pretender.
It probably helped their songwriting a little bit.
Yeah.
Just give them a little bit more dynamic. And I think Dave might have said this, I can't remember if it was in the clip at the start or not, but it was really a bookend of what the Fugees could do.
Yep.
In terms of like, hey, look at our range. We can be as heavy as and as moody as In Your Honor.
Yep.
And then we can be as mellow and subdued as... Give me one of the good tracks.
A Miracle.
Yeah, Miracle, yeah.
Yeah.
Is Miracle. We can do all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned to me the other day about, it feels like, you know, they're... everything they did after that felt somewhere in the gap between those two CDs.
100%. Yeah. I don't think they're any heavier than they are on In Your Honor.
Yeah.
Apart from maybe like White Limo, like when they were trying to do Motorhead
Stacked
stuff
Actors,
on Wasted Light and Stacked Actors. But I don't think they're any quieter than they are on like Razor or Friend of a Friend. Like, or quiet is the wrong word, like subdued.
Yeah.
Or dark. And so, yeah, they gave themselves boundaries that they then operated their career within for, you know, in the past and in the future. Like, they gave them, they let everybody kind of know what sort of band they were at the extremes.
Yeah. Which is probably one of the reasons it's, even though, and like we're probably in agreement that the acoustic album wasn't great.
No.
Like if you look at the second CD by itself, you go, nah.
Yeah.
But as a pair, as a album, as a concept without being too pretentious about having a concept album.
Yep.
It's a good pair, and it gives you a really good, this is what the Foo Fighters sound like. And if you don't know what the Foo Fighters sound like, you need to listen to an album and find out what the Foo Fighters sound like. So I think it's a worthwhile thing.
Yep. So let's have a quick look at, like we do every week, we're going to have a quick look and see how it was received at the time. Because obviously it was a bit of a departure. It was 10 acoustic tracks in a row. Let's see what the critical reception was. So Metacritic, which is, of course, an aggregate site that takes all reviews and combines them, gave it 70 out of 100, 7 out of 10. AllMusic gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Entertainment Weekly gave it A. The Guardian gave it 3 out of 5. Los Angeles Times gave it 3.5 out of 4 stars.
Who rates it at 4 stars?
Yeah, it's a bugbear when reading it.
Who gave them that? Who does the ratings out of 4?
Los Angeles Times and also USA Today.
All right, well, let's bin them off.
Yeah.
They don't get a vote anymore.
No, they're done. NME gave it 7 out of 10. Pitchfork gave it 6.8 out of 10, which again is like why, where, like you're rating something out of 10, why are you doing a point? Like, I like Pitchfork. I go to Pitchfork for a lot of my reviews and to figure out what to listen to, but fuck, they can be pretentious. So, Q gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Rolling Stone gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Spin gave it a B+. So it was like average to really good reviews, kind of.
Sounds pretty middle of the road.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like
how you would rate a Foo Fighters album, really.
Well, it's 6.5 to 7 is probably the average if we'd convert everything to out of 10.
Yeah. I
would give an album 7 out of 10 if I was like, yeah, it was fine. Like, I would feel bad giving it, I don't want to give it a 6 because, you know, I feel like 6 sounds harsh and I don't want to be harsh, but I don't want to give it a good review either.
Yeah.
You go a 7.
7. Yep.
Seven's an actual 5.
It kind of is, isn't it?
People are too polite to give something a 5.
No one's giving anything 2 or 3 either.
Middle.
Like,
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. There's like a 2 to 3 point... There's a 2 to 3. Sorry for
there's
those.
A 2 to 3 can limit.
For those on the podcast, we're in the second beer portion of the podcast, so feel free to open those as well.
That needs to be a regular spot.
So, John Pareles, of the New York Times, considered the album...
Continue talking, but I am going to pour this beer into the glass while you're speaking into the microphone.
And a, quote, unexpected magnum opus. And while Pareles felt that the rock CD overpowered the acoustic one, he considered that among the quieter songs, there was enough supple melodies and hypnotic guitar patterns to suggest fine prospects for a follow-through album. I think he's probably right about that, because Echoes, Patience, Silence, Grace definitely built on the lessons that they'd learned on that acoustic album.
Yep.
And I think the acoustic tracks on that album are a lot more polished.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's as probably an accurate review as you can give.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, the rock stuff overpowers the acoustic stuff. But that's what rock's meant to do.
Yes.
It's the whole point of rock and roll.
Yeah.
The definition of rock and roll, overpower, like turn it up, be a bit Spinal Tap, you know. And there is, the acoustic album wasn't outstanding as we said.
Yep.
But we would probably quite happily listen to 3 or 4 tracks. Like, there's probably 3 or 4 tracks on the acoustic side that if it came up on shuffle on my favorite listening app, then I'm not going to skip it.
No.
I probably wouldn't skip any of the songs on the rock album.
No.
But I think that's entirely fair.
Yeah, that's good job, John Perales. So, Mike Schiller of Pop Matters considered that, quote, In Your Honor has some great tunes, but it is in no means perfect. But he praised the rock songs for indications of just how loud this band can get.
That's good.
So
Okay.
I reckon that's kind of in line with what we were saying as well, in that, they don't really get any louder than, In Your Honor, for example, like the title track, not the album, generally. Writing for Rolling Stone, Barry Walters praised the acoustic songs while considering that In Your Honor could easily have been pruned down to one disc, which I agree with.
Yep.
Claiming the rock songs, besides Resolve, strain so hard that the melody gets lost and went in a cartoonish headbanging fashion that accentuates the band's self-inflicted one-dimensionality.
So I used to have I used to get Rolling Stone monthly subscription for a few years, and that just sounds like such a Rolling Stone review.
Yeah.
And is one of the reasons I don't have Rolling Stone subscription anymore.
Yeah. Do you think they may have leaned into that part of the rock album because they knew that they had these acoustic tracks on the other side? Like, we don't have to show our depth as much on side 1 because we're about to show it to people for 35 minutes on side 2.
I think it was a real decision about, okay, let's have one album that's black and one that's white. Yeah. Like, these are meant to be the two opposites that Foo Fighters can do. I think that was intentional.
Yeah.
Again, we might disagree on this, but I think that's why the double album was a good idea. Mm-hmm. I'm happy having that. That's fine. Doesn't bother me. Have they got songs off other albums that have got a bit more depth and nuance to them that are still loud rock songs? Yes.
Yep.
But I'm happy you going, hey, we can be really loud. And also, here's as quiet as we're going to get.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's a bit of fun. They're both short albums, realistically.
Yeah.
It's not painful or doesn't take a long time to listen through them. Like, you don't sit down on this album and skip tracks.
No.
Which I think shows you that the perceived one-dimensionality is fine. Because it's a really listenable one dimension.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world at all.
Yeah.
So we've heard some reviews, but you know what time it is. If you've listened to this podcast before, it's the time for our forward review. And I'm going to do forwards to review this album. Paul's going to do forwards to review this album.
Yep. Which I always forget about.
Would you like to go first or
nope.
second?
Second.
Peak of Foo Fighters. So when we had James over to talk about U2's Pop, you can check that out on your podcast apps. He talked about Pop as peak of U2, and not necessarily because it was their greatest album, but more it was the epicenter of where they were creatively. Yeah. And I think that they got to, and I think that fits well for this as well, that In Your Honor is the point that the Foo Fighters went as far as they could creatively, and then, like we said earlier, they've operated within the margins ever since of what they kind of established through their career at that point. And this is the point where they tried the newest of things, and they've continued to try these specific things that they've done in this album, but they haven't really developed beyond that. So I would say that, and that's not a bad thing or a good thing. You know, AC/DC is still making the same album, and I get angry. So they released this new album at the last year.
Yeah.
And I put the first track on the first single. I can't even tell you what it is because it's the same as every AC/DC song. And I pumped it up loud because that's what you're supposed to do. We're Australian, and you know you got to pump the music. Australian, Scottish, you know,
like it loud.
Literally, there's Australian Scots in that band.
Every great Australian band has Scotsmen in them.
Scots in it. And
probably just two, to be honest.
And every great Australian podcast. But
that's why I'm now a co-host.
So I pump the track, and the riff comes on, and then the drums start, and it's exactly the same track as everything else. And I get angry, and I leave my room, and I shout at Kira, I'm like, they've fucking done it again. It sounds so good. It sounds so good. How do they keep doing this? They should be dead. They should be dead, and they keep releasing like the same great song. And so I'm not saying that there's anything bad with the Fooey's doing this,
because you listened to it and you went, I still had a good time
I
listening
had
to
a
that.
great time listening to that.
And you can also get any AC/DC album, put it on, and you're going to have exactly the same level of fun.
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't matter which one. It doesn't need to be, I don't have Back in Black. You don't need it. Just put one of the other ones on and it sounds sort of the same.
Yeah, and I think the Foo Fighters for our generation are that band, and I think their consistency for how long they've been doing this.
Yeah.
You told me they've had an album in 4 decades.
Yes.
now. You know,
90s,
90s,
noughties, 10s, and now the 20s.
And now
Giving
20s.
it Medicine at Midnight, yeah.
which is just
Phenomenal.
crazy. Like that, successful albums for that long. They're eligible this year for Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
And they're still comfortably pushing out albums.
Yeah, of consistent, quality. We'll talk about Medicine at Midnight at the end of the podcast and tell you what we think of the newest
Yeah.
release. But it's that's a real skill. So I'm not saying that them not developing is a negative thing. It's actually incredibly hard to do.
I think they've done a really good job of, so I listened to Medicine at Midnight, and I had a good time.
Do you want to talk about? We'll talk about it now.
Yeah,
while we're
let's
doing
do
forward
it. And
review.
give me time to think of my forward review.
So Medicine at Midnight, the new release that came out this year, 9 tracks,
Yep.
much less than 20.
Yep. Much less than
That was
20.
in your honor.
And just for those playing at home, if you're like, hey, I might want to get into doing podcasts about albums, don't give yourself to listen to a brand new album and a double album. One of very depressing acoustic tracks.
Yeah.
It was a lot of chins.
A lot of music. Yeah, I thought it was good too. I had a really good time. Is it the greatest thing they've ever done? No.
No.
But the fact that they're still able to churn out such quality
Yep.
at this point in their career is commendable.
And I think the songs are, so like you were talking about AC/DC, and
Yeah.
it is the same song every time.
Yep.
Bon Jovi are probably similar.
Yeah.
They've probably got like a 2-album rotation.
Yeah.
And, now they've got half a dozen versions of All My Life, or is it All My Life? It's My
No,
Life.
whatever. It's My Life.
It's My Life. They've probably got half a dozen versions of that song
Yeah.
now. But I think the Foos have done a really good job of finding what they do well.
Yeah.
And I think there was a little bit more variety in terms of how it was produced and how it sounded, and little subtleties up until In Your Honor, when they probably get a little bit more settled with band members, or at least
Yeah.
the core was there by
Yeah,
that
definitely.
stage.
Yeah, like Shiflet had joined on One by One, and that was
Yeah.
kind of the last piece for,
Yeah.
for their kind of their core band.
Yeah, so they've got all the bits of the band together by that stage, and really well produced album.
Yep.
And then they've gone, okay, well, we know what we do now. Let's do that again and again and again. It's not like they're not trying to write new stuff. They're not. It doesn't. So when you listen to even a big Rolling Stones fan, listen to a Rolling Stones album
Like
And
post Exile, really.
post Exile, definitely anything after like the mid 70s.
Yeah.
Like 76, 78 maybe. What was Exile?
Yeah, that'd be around then.
Yeah, it was probably
Leave the
Exile.
comments below if you want to tell us the Rolling Stones.
Yeah,
The chronology.
yeah, go for it. But everything after that probably sounds irrelevant.
Yeah.
And like, oh, I'm going to listen to it because you're the Rolling Stones. But
Yep.
the only reason you're listening to it is because they're the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
It's not because you're really interested to hear the songs. It's not because the songs are great.
No.
Because you've got other great Stones songs. And you've got other great songs that are of that vibe. And they just seem like dated versions of the older songs.
Yeah.
The Foos, I think, have done a really good job of having that consistency that I know what to expect from a Foo Fighters album.
Yeah. That come home familiarity that makes you feel like comfortable.
But I still managed to get, this is a different song.
Yeah.
Like, particularly, like, each album's probably got a song that's got elements of how The Pretender was put together, say.
There was definitely some songs on this album. So like
Waiting on a War.
Waiting on a War had a riff that sounded a lot like something from Comeback.
Yeah.
And but that's like a particular riff that sounds similar. That's not a whole song typically. Like I'm not going, you've just ripped that chorus straight out of another song.
Yeah, they've got enough variety that I'm still interested in the other tracks.
Yeah.
I would listen to all the Foo Fighters singles back to back and have a good time. I'm not going to listen to all the AC/DC singles back to back because it will be listening to Back in Black 10 times.
Yeah.
So there's enough variety that you can get past a CD of singles.
Yeah.
So yeah, I forgot what my point was, but that brings us up to now.
Yep. So, my forward review, the peak of Foo Fighters. Or peak of Foo Fighters. Peak of Foo Fighters.
Yeah,
That's forward.
Do we allow? Can we give of like a little exception from the
Yeah,
forward
the
review?
peak of Foo Fighters.
The peak. Foo Fighters. All right, so I'm gonna go. This is hard for me. Okay, so I want to say Loud Fun, and I've got 2 words to spare. This is gonna be like one of those like doesn't quite make sense acrostic poems.
Okay.
Loud Fun, Big Hype.
Oh.
Yeah, because I think one of the reasons that I'm happy listening to this again, and one of the reasons I'm happy to rate this highly, is because it was well hyped, and I think although it might not be the 20 best songs the Foo Fighters have written, or the best collection of 20 Foo Fighters songs, I think it delivered on the hype because they did so much else right.
Yeah.
So in terms of, and like, I'm not just talking about what Dave did on the album.
Yeah.
I mean, having the idea of like, here's as loud as we can be, here's as subtle and as mellow as we can be.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's separate those literally down the middle. We're not just going to go, we'll write some rock songs, we'll write some acoustic songs, we'll put 2 albums together. That'd be it. We've gone, no, we're going to do 10 and 10. You end up with some dodgy acoustic songs. I'm cool with that. I think it pays off enough that I'll allow a couple of dodgy songs. Every album's got a couple of dodgy songs. You do that. The artwork was incredible. The all the marketing around it and the hype and the everything, like the detail you got in the physical CD, fantastic.
Yeah.
I thought all that was great. Even the way they put together the songs on the rock sides, so they're running into each other, like the track listing, spot on. So I think that the hype and the embellishment and the over the topness of it gives it like an extra point or 2 in a rating.
Yeah. Fantastic.
That makes up for the shit songs.
So, Loud Fun, Big Hype.
Yep.
And peak of Foo Fighters.
Eloquence.
Are our forward reviews. So, now we decide whether it's overrated, underrated, or a dumpster fire. And typically that's difficult because reviews are all over the place. But NME have come through for us, Paul. And they've done they're power ranked, essentially, the 9 Foo Fighters releases up to their 10th album, Medicine at Midnight.
Yep.
You found this, you sent it to me, I got upset, we both got upset. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk through their list, and then we're going to give our list. It's going to pop up on the screen for you guys. And then basically, based on where we put it compared to their list, is going to make it very easy for us to figure out whether it's underrated, overrated.
It really helps with a 7 out of 10 album to pick on somebody.
Yeah.
And I'm quite happy to pick on NME because it must be the most arrogant bunch of writers on the planet.
Like more than Pitchfork and Rolling Stone, Paul.
Yeah. Oh, no. Rolling Stone are the most pretentious. And NME are just feel like they love to tear something down, which seems funny because we're on a podcast called Overrated, Underrated, Dumpster Fire. Like 2 of those options are bad.
They're very bad.
One's horrendous. Like I don't want to ever say that, even though I've already said one's a dumpster fire. On a band I love.
Yeah, that was tough. Check out that episode. That was no, you figure it out. Listen to them all.
Yeah.
So all right, so we got the 9 albums
Let's do
ranked
it.
by NME. Let's run through them quick.
Yeah. If NME wants to give me a job still, I'll take it though.
Yeah, of course.
I can be arrogant for you.
Yeah, we won't be able to post about our job on Facebook anymore, but because the news got shut down. I don't know if you guys here in Australia, you don't get news on Facebook anymore, so no NME.
Here we go. All right. So NME, the 9th least great Foo Fighters album, One by One.
That hurts.
How do you feel?
Bad. That's bad call.
They've got a brief thing. I'm just going to read one of the lines because it's popped out at me. Yeah, that scratchy intro to All My Life can still send shivers down the spine. But after a handful of decent singles, this one rapidly runs out of steam halfway through.
So one of those handful of decent singles is what I think is Dave Grohl's greatest songwriting triumph, which is All Times Like These.
Times, yes.
And that is off this album. And
Potentially
I think
their best song.
Yeah. A lot of people talk about Everlong, and that's obviously important to a lot of
That's
people.
great.
But Times Like These, especially like last year, it was quite resonant. It's really, really tough to knock that album that harshly as the worst album they've done.
Even
Come on,
if you
Enemy.
discount the other 8-9 songs on the album and base it on All My Life, One by One, and Times Like These,
Yep.
those songs can 100% carry an album.
Yeah.
Most albums, half of the songs are trash.
Yep.
Fillers.
Very much.
I would listen to more than that on this album, but those songs are perfect. Anyway, Enemy can...
So the next one, so number 8.
You should just fuzz that bit out. All right, so number 9, One by One. Number 8, Echoes, Patience, Silence, Grace. Echoes, Silence, Patience, Grace.
That's an interesting.
Yep, interesting. So that had like Let It Die. Apparently, Dave sounded tired on that.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
Pretender, Long Road to Ruin, and they've given it.
There's some really great tracks on that. So number 7,
Here we go. It's in your honor.
In Your Honor at number 7.
All right, spoilers. We know what's going to happen here. All right, so 7 in your honor. I don't care what they want to have to say about it.
We've said enough.
Yeah. Number 6, Sonic Highways. That's interesting. 5, Concrete and Gold. 4, Wasting Light. 3, Nothing Left to Lose. Number 2, Foo Fighters, self-titled, first one out. And number 1, The Color and the Shape.
Which is, of course, the most popular choice for that. Like, a lot of people love Color and the Shape, and would rank it there. So we had a chat during the week poll,
Yeah.
and I've actually got our lists.
Oh, you've got our
Ready to
list.
go.
Great.
So let's go from, we're not negative Nellies here. Let's go from our favorite album to our least.
Yep, go.
So my number 1 album is One by One. I think that's a great album.
Yep.
It's consistently aggressive, even though, we talked about the sound issues before. It's still such an arresting, aggressive album. And obviously the Queens of the Stone Age influence bleeds through it. And
Yeah.
I've already talked about Times Like These. I reckon that's the best song he's ever written.
Yeah, I might... Did we do one each?
Yeah, let's do it. What's your number 1 poll?
One by One.
Hey! So it's literally a flip from Enemies. Like, they put
Yeah.
it last and we put it first.
And this is why Enemies... So I think One by One, I think what people miss about One by One is we mentioned the sound not being great, like in terms of like the production and things,
Yeah.
which definitely makes a difference to an album.
Yeah.
At Sam if you disagree. But despite that, and despite probably 2 or 3 songs that I can think of that are potentially subpar songs,
Yeah.
the albums, you can connect to the album so easily because it
Yeah.
feels really raw.
Yeah.
And just gives you some energy.
Yeah.
If you ever need to pump yourself up, just chuck that first track on and
it's-
away you go.
It's my go-to, like, album if I'm working out or running or anything
Yeah.
like that. It's just, it's such a great album. All right, number 2. I went Foo Fighters self-titled. I think it's quite underrated. I think it's a great album. Obviously very raw and DIY sounding, but the songs on that are so good for a guy first time out. And I think it sounds the most 90s of all the albums, even the ones that they released in the 90s.
Yep.
And I love that era of like Seattle grunge and just post grunge where everybody's trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah,
after
what's next, yeah.
Kurt left. It was really good. Your number 2, Paul.
Color on the Shape. Again, like you said, it's probably an obvious choice for a number 1 for a lot of people. I am a big Everlong fan. I'm one of those Foo Fighters fans.
And Monkey Wrench. I remember you like learning that
Yeah.
riff when we were younger.
Yeah, that would have been torturous.
It's a tough one to play.
It is. It's
Yeah.
got... I feel like there's a lot of songs on that album where you go, this lead guitarist to the drummer.
Yeah. It's all very rhythmic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like you think you know what you're meant to do next, then you go, oh no, why is he doing it different to how everyone else would play it?
Yeah.
I know we wrote them, but yeah, so I go Color on the Shape next.
So I've gone at number 3. There's nothing left to lose. I used to have
Good
real
album.
problems with this album. An ex of mine really liked Generator, and we were fighting, so I decided I didn't like it. And but that's not a really good reason. It's a great
Terrible
song.
reason.
And so, I really enjoyed that album. It's just the three-piece at that point. They're between rhythm guitarists or lead guitarists. And there's, again, another really DIY sound. And also the sound of a guy that is really struggling to decide whether he wants the band to be a thing or not, and ends up being quite honest throughout the thing.
One of my favorite quotes about the Foo Fighters is it might have been Enemy that was interviewing Taylor actually, and they've gone, so is Dave a bit of a dictator? And Taylor's gone, well, yeah, but he's the nicest one. Yeah, so I think like that it adds up.
Yeah. So you're number 3, Paul.
Number 3, I'm putting it in your honor there.
Yep. I'll put In Your Honor at 4.
Yeah, I think it was. We've already discussed that a lot, obviously, but I'm probably putting it there as opposed to 4 because it's because of the extra effort that went into it in terms of the double album and stuff. That's what gets it the extra point that pushes it above another album.
Yeah, I love that rock side so much.
It's so
I
good.
think it deserves its spot there.
Yep.
I put that one at 4. You put Nothing Left to Lose at 4. So we kind of swapped those two.
Yep. And again, close calls there.
Yeah.
And
like, there's really not much to split these albums a lot of the time.
There's but I feel like this is a lot easier than doing AC/DC albums. Because they're just...
How would you even know?
You have actual Black and Black, number 1. Everything else is at number 2.
Like Those About to Rock, maybe.
Yeah.
That'd be...
But yeah, I think, same reasons for Nothing Left to Lose.
I've got The Colour and the Shape at 5, which is pretty low for Wiz fans, and you've got They're Self-Titled at 5.
Yeah. Again, I like it for the same reasons as you mentioned, but I think I'm just prioritizing the other stuff, the songs on Colour and the Shape.
Yeah, a more polished band, a more established feel.
Yeah, I appreciate it being nice and raw and energetic, and Dave just trying shit out.
Yeah.
But I think they've developed it by The Colour and the Shape.
The rest of our lists are pretty similar. We've got Echoes, Patience, Silence, Grace at 6. I've got Wasting Light at 7. You've got Concrete and Gold.
There's a little bit of a
kind
mix
of much
here.
of a muchness at that point of the list, really.
Yeah. So our 7 and 8 is Wasting Light and Concrete and Gold, just flipped. And then number 9, Sonic Highways. So for both of us, and I think
Sonic is clearly and I'm surprised NME had it as high as they did. Is clearly probably their, and probably even by their own admission, their weakest effort in that they were doing something incredibly ambitious. They were traveling to different recording studios around America. They were doing a documentary. They were trying to shine a light on musical scenes that hadn't gotten the sort of pop that they had in previous. They had a lot of collaborators come in. It was a big effort, and a lot of good came out of it. But the album is a little bit weak, I think, especially lyrically.
Okay, so here's a great thing about why In Your Honor I think should be high up that list, and why Sonic Highways is down lower, even though the reason I've put In Your Honor so high is because of the other stuff that goes with it. Like, it gets another point or two in my rating scale because of the double album, because of the separation of tracks, which some people disagree with entirely. But you can still, by having that rock album first, particularly, it's listenable. Yep. You come in, it's a really accessible album. You put it on, you go, cool, that's great. I'm going to give it another listen. I'm going to watch them play live on this album. I'm going to listen to interviews about this album. I'm interested about this album.
Yeah.
Sonic Highways, interesting story, interesting thing to try and do.
Yep.
They made a great effort with it. I really appreciate that. But because the end product was meh, I listened to Sonic Highways maybe once.
Yeah, same.
And went, nothing really grabs me. I might give it a second listen, I might not.
Yeah, I did a big re-listen of all of them chronologically at the start of the year. And Sonic Highways was definitely the toughest one to kind of sit through. Yeah. Even though it's quite short, there's not a lot of tracks on it. And Gary Clark Jr.'s on it, and I love Gary Clark Jr. But yeah, the album just wasn't as good.
The thing is, though, if that was a better album, it doesn't go from 9 to 8, it goes from 9 to 6.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing, and this I think should factor into the rating, we were talking about In Your Honor being like the definitive Foo Fighters album, as you heard at the start of the podcast.
That was
Dave.
the one that Dave wanted people to listen to to get an idea of who the band was.
Look at the top 5 in that list. They're In Your Honor and all the songs, all the albums before In Your Honor.
Yeah.
The bottom half of that list that we've both done separately, although they're quite similar in places, the bottom half is after In Your Honor.
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah, and that's me not liking like Echo's Patience. I quite liked.
Yeah, I think it's a really solid
and
album.
I think Concrete and Golden, Wasting Light have got a couple of really good tracks on them.
Yeah, Rope and
Rope's
Skies
great.
and Neighborhood and Run off Concrete and Gold.
And particularly hearing some of those live, like Skies and Neighborhood, I remember hearing it. The first time I heard it was on the radio. It wasn't me listening to it, like choosing to listen to it.
Yep.
Whereas a lot of the Foo stuff I've done, Foo's got an album out. I'm
yeah,
going to listen
you're
to
gonna
it.
make the effort.
I've chosen. Whereas the first time I've heard it was on the radio, and I was underwhelmed.
Oh,
The first time I heard it on the radio, heard it live, it blew my socks off. Like almost literally.
Yeah.
It was really, really good. Big. The rhythm and the aggressiveness of how slow it is, I'm going to say,
yeah,
really hit you
Yeah.
when you're in a stadium.
yeah.
And they've cranked it.
And that's the thing about the Fooies as well, is like they're a band that they write songs to play them live, really, don't they?
Yeah. They understand that. Cool.
So there are lists. You can see them on the screen now. You may have been able to see them on the screen earlier as well. But there are lists compared to NME's. And it makes our job very easy now because we both rated the album that we've been talking about, In Your Honor, much higher than NME did. And so I guess the only thing is to say that we think it's underrated then.
I think it's underrated.
Yeah.
It's more than a 6.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I think it's better as well. I definitely think it's better than their 7th best album according to NME. So
Yep.
yeah, that's us. That's our rating for In Your Honor.
And next time on Paul and Sam Fight with NME,
But we want to know what you think. Hit us up on our socials.
There.
Leave comments if you're watching on YouTube. Let us know what you think. Do you think it's an underrated album? Do you think it's overrated? Or maybe you're one of those few people that we were talking about that we haven't met yet that really dislike the Foo Fighters and you think it's a dumpster fire. We'd like to hear from you, so let us know. But what we're going to do now is our other segment that we do every week, which is, what have you been listening to lately?
Paul, have I
what have
been
you
listening to lately? I've been listening to, very on brand again, there's a little Glasgow punk band called... so the little band out of the UK called Fabric Bear.
Yep.
They're fantastic. They've released half a dozen songs, so not huge by any means, but they just released a new track like a week or two ago called All I Want. So listen to it on Tidal so they get paid, or if you don't have Tidal, one of the other ones before you download Tidal.
So Tidal, for those playing at home, obviously there's other streamings, like Apple Music pays a little bit more than Spotify, but like you'd have to be living under a rock if you didn't know that Spotify by now, like they pay so little to artists, whereas Tidal pays a little bit more, so maybe that's one to think about. Obviously also you can buy the music off Bandcamp, but
and particularly given someone like Fabric Bear, that's
Can't
a
be
small
tour.
up-and-coming band.
haven't been able to play gigs. 'cause
Haven't been able to
UK
play
shut
gigs.
down.
So they released 5 songs. They were doing really well. They've actually get quite a few listens. And they were about to start their first full UK headline tour like the week before COVID hit and everything shut.
Oh,
So hopefully they can get back to it. There's again
Fabric Bear,
Fabric Bear.
which is a great band name.
It's a good band name.
That's a phenomenal band.
I feel like, let us know if you want us to do an underrated, overrated dumpster fire band name episode. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think that'd be great because there's a lot of dumpster fires.
There's a lot of really bad band names.
Yeah.
I've been in some of them. And
Foo Fighters.
by his own admission, he really dislikes it.
I think the quote I liked of his about the band name was, "If I knew we were going to be this successful, I would have thought a better name." Yeah.
So, Fabric Bear. That's
Fabric Bear. Give it a listen, 100%.
awesome. I've got a ton because it's been a while since we've done the last podcast. A 2001 house French album called Newcomer by Lorca. I've really been digging. There's this weird jazz instrumentation. It's very fun. You can put it on the background while you work. It's a little lo-fi beats. It's great. I've been listening to Stephen Wilson's The Future Bites album. Stephen Wilson, lead singer of Porcupine Tree, kind of seminal UK prog rock demigod, really. He's released a bit of an electronic album where he's kind of a little less guitar, a little more kind of beats. And his kind of typical very over the top. Think Muse, like politics style lyrics, and think Muse kind of like singing, I guess, and like prog movements.
So what you're saying is think Muse.
Think Muse, yeah.
If Muse weren't Muse, they'd be Future Bites.
Future Bites by Steve Wilson. But I've also decided this week, and I'm not very far into it, but I've decided to do a thing that I'm coining the Needle Drop Challenge, which
Cool.
is fellow YouTuber who has no idea who we are, but obviously
Fellow YouTuber, at the point you've said that, neither of us have a video on YouTube. Not under our personal accounts anyway.
Anthony Fantano, who is obviously referenced a lot. He's essentially Pitchfork these days.
Yeah.
And so I've decided that every album he listens to this year, I'm also going to listen to.
Cool.
And we're going to start doing weekly chats about like an album that's come out that week that we review
Yep.
as well, which is something that you can look out for on our Instagram.
Yep.
But I'm 2.5 albums into this. One of them was Welfare Jazz by the Viagra Boys. The other one was Drunk Tank Pink by Shame.
Both of those sound like albums I would listen to.
Yeah, well, they are. They're like punk albums. They're kind of this raw, kind of raucous sound. I think you really dig them. So
I'll give him a listen, and I'll let you know what I think on our Instagram.
and I'm halfway through DJ Sabrina the Teenage DJ's album Charm. It goes for 3.5 hours. Not a joke, of like house music that samples the television show Sabrina the Teenage Witch like constantly.
Brilliant.
Just random samples from the TV show. So if you used to watch that TV show when you were a kid like I did, then
Melissa Joan Hart?
yeah, it'll
Yep.
bring back some memories. And who doesn't like Fall to the Floor? So check that one out as well. But yeah, that's what I've been listening to.
That sounds great.
So we do this hopefully every week.
Yes.
We're going to put a podcast together. We've got a lot coming up. The Billie Eilish documentary comes out at the end of the month, so we're looking to talk where do we
Billie
go
Eilish.
when we fall asleep. We're going to have podcast regular Kiri in to have a chat about that. And you've got something planned for someone, the only person in the history of the world that hasn't seen Hamilton yet.
Yeah, I can't believe
Sam Edmonds.
Sam has not seen Hamilton, and I'm a big Hamilton fan, huge. So we might do this as I'll lead this one. We might make you watch it and then just record the podcast straight after.
Yeah.
Get Sam a real raw reaction, and I reckon we might even start with the reviews on that one.
Yeah.
And we'll see what you think, because look, it's fairly highly rated.
Yeah. I have
but-
heard that. The people like it.
Yeah, it's people seem to like it, and the fact that you've not listened to it,
I've
given
heard
the
one song
amount of
from the thing.
music that
Yeah.
you listen to,
Yeah,
is
it's
astonishing.
It's actually, I think I'm mildly proud of my ability to, and not from like not liking it or anything, just my ability to live in the bubble and just
Yeah.
like shut myself out from Hamilton. I'm mildly impressed.
yeah, a musical free rock you've been living under.
Yeah, it's a real achievement.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, stay tuned for that one. We're going to have podcast newbie,
Yes.
Sophie on for that one.
Sophie Schilling will be on to join us.
That'll be great. And we've got tons of albums that we want to talk about, but we would also
Heaps.
love you to let us know what you want us to talk about
Yeah.
too. So please let us know in the comments below or on our social media. Over under Dumpster Fire on Twitter. Over under Dumpster Fire on Instagram.
Is it under over or over under?
It's
It'll be
under
on
over, I
the
think.
screen.
Yeah, it will be on the screen. And we're on Facebook as well, because we're not a news site. I think we're still up. so there's that as well.
Yep.
But yeah, have you got anything you want to plug, Paul?
No, Fabric Bear.
Just
anything I
more
wanna-
Scottish punk. Everybody should.
More, yeah, anything that's on the label 7 West is genuine gold. I've never been so impressed by a short, small, wee Glasgow punk label in my life. They're great.
They're fantastic.
And really like nice, easy listening, fun punk. That's just, it's just good music and doesn't care about anything else. So yeah, give it a listen.
Nice. Awesome. Well, on behalf of Paul and I, that's us for the week. We'll see you when you flip the side.
Love a sign off.